Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, software for all of your production needs. Stay tuned for more information later in the show. Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer Podcast, and in this episode, we speak with award-winning costume designer Leslie Kavanagh. She is one of the many creative forces behind the unforgettable look in The Handmaid's Tale. From June's symbolic wardrobe evolution to the pastel subversion of New Bethlehem, Leslie is going to walk us through how costume design informs storytelling on The Handmaid's Tale. So, Leslie, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we jump into the TV show, I would like to know what inspired you to want to become a storyteller through costume design. How did that career start for you?
Oh gosh. So it's sort of funny. My sister is a costume designer. So I had been
Oh,
exposed.
interesting.
Yeah. So I had been exposed to it, but I would say that when my sister started, I had no idea what it was about. Like, I do think there's a lot of people that don't understand how much there is in the arts in the film and television community.
Right.
There's so many different positions in all the different categories and all the different departments. And I think it's something that, when you're watching movies or TV, you don't really think that you could be part of that when you're young. It seems so far away. And so, to quote one of my favorite movies, in a galaxy far, far away. And
I think I've heard of that somewhere.
small little thing,
Yes.
But so when I started going to theater school, I went to theater school and I was going to theater school in a different city than where my sister was working. My sister was working here in Toronto, Canada. And I came to visit her and I got to go on a show, like on a set with her. And it just blew my mind. I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so crazy and wild and fun and cool. And obviously you're very starstruck. And even the things like craft service was blowing my mind. Like you get fed all day. Like it was sort of like that, you're just introduced to a whole new world of a job, a possibility, a career. And so I went back to school. And then the following summer, there was very busy here in the city of Toronto. And that was sort of when MOWs were the rage. Like they were every 6 to 8 weeks, they were making another one and another one. So as one is sort of wrapping up, another one is prepping, they overlap. So it was just a very, very busy time in this city and not enough people to fill the spots. And so I was here as a good student struggling to make money. And my sister basically introduced me into this world by saying, like, we're really short, I can train you. And I just started taking some calls in the costume department as a brand new, not knowing anything and being trained as I went. And so that was kind of how I got introduced and started. And so through that, I am actually somebody that has worked my way up the ranks from being at the very bottom as a costume assistant. And then I, did background work with the costumes. I did buying, I did breakdown, I did, my goodness, I've assistant designed, I was a set supervisor, as a truck costumer. I've done it. I've sort of basically done it all. And then through that evolution of just, I hope, making a good name for myself and meeting people, I had opportunities then to branch out into designing. And a director that I did a lot of movies with, Darren Lynn Bousman, he was part of the Saw franchise, and I did a lot of movies with him. He had a movie that was happening. He did want my sister. My sister was his main costume designer, and she was unavailable. So he said, okay, well, I'll take Leslie. And I was like, what? Are you crazy? I don't know how to design. And he said, that's okay, Leslie. When you very first worked with me, I also didn't know how to direct because I did his first movie with him. And he said, so now look at us. So I went and did a project with him, and then it just sort of took off from there.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious about something, and we can talk about The Handmaid's Tale specifically as an example. The costumes are so visually iconic. My question is this: how do you maintain that iconic look and still come up with enough variety to serve the story, to show the character arc, to help the character tell their story in that episodic world? How does that work?
Well, specifically with a show such as The Handmaid's Tale, the original costume designer, Anne Crabtree, there is a book out there. There was a movie done before. There were a lot of creative forces that came together to create these initial costumes.
Right.
And Anne Crabtree was, of course, the spearhead of it as the original costume designer. And for me, when I came into this show, it was basically because the story arc had gone somewhere different. So as a costume designer, I felt it offered the opportunity to come in and tell a visual story from a different perspective.
Right.
And it was very enticing to be able to obviously come in and be a part of such a an epic show that holds so much relevance for so many different reasons, but also one that's so costume forward, where the costumes are really helping to tell the story. And so I was really great with the scripts. Like I was lucky in that the scripts told so many great stories about the characters and what they're doing, and that we were able to push the boundaries in the world of Gilead. But then for the first time, we were really showcasing the world of Toronto for the character of June Osborne when she becomes free. And we're seeing what her journey is in that side of the world because she hasn't been free for so long, and how we were using clothes and colors and patterns and textures to help her visually come to life in a new environment. And then for the world of Gilead, how do I push the envelope there? Well, it's again, storyline dictates something. I started to switch the silhouettes a little bit more from the overall 1950s aesthetic that had sort of been adopted. And I kind of started leaning into the late 30s and early 40s because there was a few reasons behind that for me. I feel like that's like wartime, where women still were very feminine, but also had a lot of function, and that's what I feel the women in Gilead were. I liked the silhouettes are very feminine but strong, and so I started being able to lean into that and create new silhouettes, which then keeps telling the story, and we're not repeating anything, and everyone's getting their own fresh outfit and look that tells what's happening at that point in the script.
And what's that process like when you are brought onto a project, you're reading the script, coming up with your ideas, and then you have to present those ideas either to a showrunner or director or producer. What's that dance like when you're creating those ideas? If it's possible to talk through that process. Do you do like a pitch deck first or a lookbook, or how does that work?
So it goes both ways. You can do sketching. I do sketching. I'm a very tactile person where I think I like to see, touch, feel. So I when I'm having my costume meetings, so we do concept meetings and we talk about the overall tone of the show of that like that particular script. So here on The Handmaid's Tale, we shoot in blocks. So we do two scripts at a time. And so you get a director that usually is doing one block, so two scripts. And it's really great because they sort of your storylines tie into each other a little bit. So you're okay, if this happens in this, in episode 105, it ties over to 106. You're able to have a little bit of continuity from that director. The overall show does have continuity, of course, that we have to, adhere to certain rules and aesthetics and sort of policies. But for me, I do a bit of everything. I do a little bit of sketching. I do a little bit of what I like to call cut and paste of different things where I'm like, my whole crew knows, and a lot of people that have worked with me know, my favorite phrase is like, if A and B had a baby, that's what I'm trying to. So,
So
if,
give me an example of A and B in this story.
so okay, here in Handmaid's Tale, it would sort of be, well, here's a great one. In season 5, I was able to introduce a new color for the first time. It was the plums. And everyone's like, well, what's this shade and what's this going to be? And so my whole thing and my whole big backstory to how to make that really symbolic and what that's who they were and what that stood for is I was like, it's like if a wife and a handmaid had a baby, that's the color I want. Because that is really what it is. It's like that the plums are the adopted daughters of prominent Gilead wives, but they're the biological children of handmaids, most of them, whether they were kidnapped from these ladies or birthed through in Gilead. And so for me, it was really playing around with the different shades of blues and teals and the iconic handmade red to get a range of different plummy, purpley colors to see what that would look like. So that would be a
And
great example.
and and when you're using colors so specifically to tell the story, is it something that you track like on a spreadsheet? Am I getting too in the weeds there? I mean, do you actually, or is it all just intuitive?
It's a bit of both. I do a lot of custom dyeing. All the blues and teals you see for
Oh,
the wives, like so Serena Joy Waterford has her own palette for me. Naomi, she was Putnam, now Lawrence, has her own palette. So all my wives, and what I do is I will end up putting all my fabrics and swatching it out or sitting in the cutting room and just playing around and balancing all my colors. So when people are in a big scene together, making sure that all my blues and teals match and balance, and that's the main characters are always popping more, and that everybody complements them in a really great way. And the commanders are a little different, unfortunately, because they only get black and white, and we don't, so it's doing a little bit of texture on the ties. The suspenders have a little bit of texture in them because men in Gilead don't wear belts, they wear suspenders. And we play around with that and the suits and the textures and weaves in the shirt, the cotton weaving in the shirt. Like, will it have a texture? Will it have a window paint, like faint window paint check? That's how I sort of try to do that and make sure that everybody gets little personalized details. And we do that with the contemporary side too for my people in Toronto. It's the same thing because we have the big ensemble cast would be like Moira and Rita and Luke and June all together. Mark Towello comes in. So I would sit and make sure all my colors that I want to do for everybody balances. In the contemporary side, I always start with June, of course, and I build out from there and make sure who is she up with the most and making sure that the colors are always balanced and complementary to one another so that everybody gets to have their own moment and their own focal moment, of course, on camera without competing.
and I'm assuming you work with the production designer and the DP as well in terms of making sure costumes will pop in a certain environment and you're shooting in. Does that dialogue go on as well?
So in season 5, which was really fun for me, was we had a new director of photography, Nicola Daly, came in, and Elizabeth Williams, who was she had been the production designer here for many seasons and very accomplished and super great human being. Her and I gelled very quickly. We got to meet really quickly because we were both here in Toronto, and we just were very symbiotic. Like we everything like it's so beautiful when that happens, when you get that really great creative vision that's so online. That doesn't mean that every single thing we did was, oh yeah, I agree too. Like, we had always had really great, healthy discussions and always found ways to make everything work. And for me, those conversations when we have our concept meetings and then they're in I always have the DP and I always have the production designer in my costume meeting. Like we'll do a concept meeting that involves a lot of people. And then each department kind of gets a bit more of a personalized meeting where you go through script points and elements and gags and rigs and all that sort of information. And I always have them there so we can really talk it through. And I present stuff. I would say that something that was really unique too in season 5 was that traditionally the Handmaid's Tale always shot in colder months here in Canada.
Mhm.
And we had a lot of cloaks. A lot of things were covered up. The natural lighting, the atmosphere was always just a bit more dreary which was perfect for Gilead because of the nature of what it was, but also in real times that was winter. So, and when season 5 happened, we started a different schedule. And so for the first time we were shooting in warmer months. And so I was able to really lose the cloaks. And, everyone always jokes like I had brought in a lot more brighter hues of the turquoises and the blues and the teals for our Gilead ladies. And I was always just joking like that was the spring summer collection that was never seen before. We never got to showcase it before. So, and working with that and showing, I'm very collaborative that way. I'll bring to our director of photography, whoever that might be. And these are the fabrics I'm using. These are, what I want. This is what I want to use. And this is the balance. And, everyone just worked together so beautifully to make such a beautiful show.
Well, I read somewhere, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you said designing for Serena and Naomi were especially rewarding for you. And if that's the case, I'm curious why. Why was that such a rewarding creation?
It really was. They really was for two reasons. The Ever Carradine and Yvonne Strahovski are just incredible people and such a joy to work with, and always having so much fun in the fitting room, being down for anything. So just that alone was so great. to have that experience. But again, it's because those characters are always builds for me tip to toe. Like their shoes are painted to match their outfits. Like there's nothing store bought for them except for their pantyhose. And so I don't make those. Um, and the thing that's super incredible is they those characters are always challenging me to just do better each time. Like never repeat. I was so hard on myself, but also challenging to myself to make sure I never repeated a silhouette, a neckline, a detail. And that's kind of why they became a little bit special to me because they were always a build that I always had to go somewhere else with the next element, the next element, the next element. And so as a costume designer, it's just totally rewarding and so creatively fulfilling.
Well, when you're creating so many unique looks, how do you keep it fresh? Where do you draw inspiration?
Good question. I, it's interesting question. And I do get asked that. And what's sort of why I really feel like The Handmaid's Tale I was meant to be here and meant to be a part of this series is because I never didn't have a vision and I didn't ever have a stumbling block on what to do next. I always had an instinct on where to go. And that's hard when don't forget, I have to build for every single background performer, every single day player. For Lizzie Moss's character, I built a lot of her contemporary clothes because she had so many stunt doubles and she goes always through so many elements, rain, sleet, snow, sun, like getting hit by a truck, getting dragged by, all these different things. And being able to control the narrative of the multiples I need and how we shape things and do things to, I'll build a blouse for her when she's got to have a harness on, but then I have to build the same blouse that doesn't have it's all these creative things that come into play on the practical side of making a show. And it was just, I don't know, like I I know I probably shouldn't say this, but sometimes I look back and I'm like, wow, I did do that. And because it's like I really didn't feel stifled. I didn't feel like I'm not a writer, but I didn't have writer's block, designer's block. I don't know what you call it, but I always felt instinct for where that character was going and what it should be. And, the whole cast on that show was so incredible, to be honest, and having such amazing artists that are always down in game for what you're doing. Like Commander Lawrence, we see him leave Gilead and go into Toronto. And I was like, I'm not putting you in black. This is an opportunity to do something different. And Bradley Whitford's like, let's do it. What do you want to do? And I'm trying to think, what color have we not done? And there's not many because I'm not putting you in gray because you're no Econo, Mr. Bradley Whitford. No. And so just sort of, and so we end up with the browns and we did browns and blues for him and really tried to brighten him. Like that's him trying to assimilate into the free world of Canada, not seem so intimidating when he goes to find June, things of that nature. And so when you have just a really amazing, cast that are so open to everything, the showrunners, the writers, the directors, like the list goes on and on. It's such a collaborative effort and that people were always so open and embraced all my ideas. And even when I was just like, another phrase of mine is like, I'm just going to push it one bubble. I'm just pushing this one bubble. And sometimes like, or I'm pushing this two bubbles, and sometimes Lizzie would be like, two bubbles might be too much. Just pop one of those bubbles and just keep one. And I'm like, okay. So
I like that. Pushing it one bubble. That's good.
Yeah. So just trying to and presenting them with that, going for it, not being afraid to go for it. They didn't like everything I said. I mean, sadly, but there is more to my world than just what I want to do, obviously. So not every idea got passed, but there were some that I really pushed hard for. I felt so strongly for, and they were really like, you know what, Leslie, you're right. That is the right call. We didn't think we wanted that. Now we're seeing what you're presenting, and we do want that. And sometimes it was like, we understand why you're presenting this. Here's why we don't want it. And it's like, okay, I'll pivot. No problem.
Well, do you also look at the arc of a character over a season when you're designing that costume? Do you plan ahead for the change in that costume, or do you do that just as the show progresses? How does that work?
So I'm very much planner. And I always have a contingency plan for my backup plan. And I do. I always read ahead on the scripts. I'm lucky as the costume designer. I do get to get many scripts ahead of time. And the arc is always really important, knowing where your character is going and am I going to help them visually get there? I'm a visual storyteller, right? How can I help give them the visual cues and aids that are going to help them bring their character to life in the moment? These actors are so accomplished. They could be wearing a burlap sack and they would still look amazing just by just to be really honest. Luckily, they want a bit more than that. So I'm here. But it's sort of, yeah, the arc is very important to me to follow and to know the progression. I use colors a lot, like starting off bright and going dark, or the one thing I actually like to do is the opposite, because I think as things get darker, people are expecting the character to go darker. And I love doing the opposite, where we start them dark and they start to peel back as they're getting stronger and more in charge of themselves, that they get brighter because they're more confident. So I like to play around with stuff like that too.
And is that also the same for the emotion of a character? Like if a character's going through an emotional journey, do you take that into account for costume, or is it just more the character arc?
Both, actually, both, because they're sort of symbiotic, right? It's like you know what the journey is, and you have to look, for me, anyways. I always look for the practical side. Like if June is running through a forest and then she gets caught by Gilead and she's in a jail, but then she escapes, what are all the practical things I have to take into? And what does it mean? Like, is she kidnapped? So one of the things we did, this was another season 5 thing, but she's outside her house. It's a bright, beautiful, sunny day, and she's finally starting to feel a little bit relaxed and a little bit more, okay, I guess this is my new life. And I put her in this really beautiful buttery yellow shirt that we made for her and some cropped blue jeans and cute little keds. And she looked really happy and sunny. And it was the scene where she gets smoked by a truck and ends up in the hospital. And it was for that reason. It was like to not foreshadow the danger and
Ah,
playing against it so that so when it happens and the audience saw it, it was like, oh my God, like, no one was expecting that, because she's actually, so we would try to use clothes in a way to also throw people off the scent a little bit, if you will.
gotcha. That makes sense. And in working with the actors, I've talked about this with other costume designers, and I'm curious, what your answer is. A lot of times actors want business. They want things that they can use in a scene. Do they ask you for things in the costume that they can use tactily in the scene? Does that make sense? Like, does a guy want to play with his tie, or does a character want to have a suit that maybe just doesn't fit quite right, and that helps him drive that what that character is going through? Does that make sense? And do you get requests like that?
Yeah, the one thing I will say in Gilead, because the rules are so stringent, there's not a lot of movement. So certain things, the women's heels, we play around with different heights of heels for them for what their scene is and how they want to walk, and how we cinch them in on the waist and make them
Right.
stand up straight or things like that. And then for with the respect to the contemporary side, it would be more like, June, I always try to keep semi-utilitarian. Like she was always kind of in go mode, and she's sort of always got a little bit of that warrior sense to her at all times, given her what she's been through and that she's always had to overcome and adapt and just use what she's got. So we made sure she always had like lots of pockets, and she was layered so that she can take things off, peel back, but also shelter herself and hide herself if she needed to. So I do things like that. I would say that some of the things we did in Handmaids that were in the same vein, but not quite that, was I really wanted to give a lot of very small hidden details that we didn't really want to or need to explain necessarily to the audience, but that they were character things that helped the actors feel something. So our character Rita, she wears a pearl necklace when she's in Toronto when I came on board. And the reason being is the pearl is the birthstone of her deceased son that she lost in the war to Gilead. So it was a moment, because she does talk about him throughout the seasons. And so I wanted to give it, and she loved that, because it's sort of something where she would sometimes just go like this and have a moment. And it was the same thing too with, June's character we gave her a locket, like we see Luke giving her a locket in season 5. And boy, oh boy, did I get so many questions about that locket. It was like, who's in the locket? Is it Hannah and Nicole? Is it Nick and Luke? Like, who's in the locket? And so Lizzie and I would just joke. I'm like, let's just never answer who's in the locket. And let everyone decide who they want it to be. It's like, who do you want it to be? Do you want it to be the kids? Do you want it to be her men? Do you want it to be her mother? Who do you want it to be? And so we never ever did open the locket. And it carries over to season 6, and we never ever open the locket.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so it's
Wow.
the same thing too, is like, June gets a new necklace. Her mother gives her a necklace in season 6 when she's leaving Alaska. And it's of 3 stones. And so it's June, and it's the same thing. Is it her 2 kids on either side? Is it Nick and Luke on it? Like, who do you want it to be? So
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, I'm also curious, what do you do on your off time to sort of rekindle that fire and recharge that battery when you're sort of, kind of decompressing after a shoot and you're waiting for the next project? What do you do just to stay fresh?
I sleep. No, so I've been really lucky. So the last couple of years, I haven't really had much break. I've been able to have amazing opportunities and kind of go from a few shows back to back. Like I went from, straight from season 5 into something else, and then it came back into season 6. So it's been kind of a little bit, but I like to travel. Myself and my husband like to travel. We like to sort of just unwind. Toronto's a very vibrant city. There's lots of things to see and do here. So we do try to just take in a little bit of the city, reconnect, family, friends. I mean, I have been told by my crew, I did not think this was who I was, but apparently I'm a workaholic. I didn't realize that. Like in the sense that I'm always kind of, my crew's always like, how are you not tired? How do you keep going? And I think that's such a beautiful thing about my position for sure, is that while the components of what I do are the same on every show, it's always a new story. It's always a new character. It's always a new location. There's always so many new things. And I've just so far been so blessed and so lucky in the opportunities that have come my way to get so much fulfillment and creative, ideas just start going. I can tell right away when I get called for something. If you read a script, you can tell right away if you're resonating with it or not. And there's been a few where I'm just like, I'm going to take a pass on this one. I just didn't really, feel I could bring what I think the show needs. And the excitement of when you're talking with directors and showrunners and producers and you see their excitement, if you can't match their energy and their enthusiasm for being there, then I just sort of pass. But luckily, those have been very few, and more yeses than nos. So
Well, you may be a workaholic, but also it may be just it's it's a gift when you get to do what you truly love as a career. And so you're clearly doing a good job and very passionate about it. But well, before we wrap up, how can people follow your work? Do you have designs online, or are you an Instagram person? How can people, see what you're up to?
I'm not, so social media, I only have Instagram. I don't do the Facebooks. I don't do anything else. I am actually quite busy. So and I find that Instagram is the way that people want to go. I love
Sure.
to, like right now, because we've just aired the final season of Handmaid's Tale season 6, but also the final of the whole series. There's no more Handmaid's Tale. That I'm really loving showing some behind the scenes snippets on my Instagram.
Oh, nice.
I'm really, again, it's so great. Like this show, the fan base that started with this show and is still there and is still invested and still interested and still curious and still traumatized and still, wanting to see this stuff. They have started following me on Instagram, and I have so many just really amazing questions and insight and beautiful comments and what they loved about the characters. And even when they're saying like, I hate Serena, but I love that outfit, it's sort of fun. It's really, really fun. And so I really do love sharing that now with everybody, because I do think that interests them. They want to know how this world was created. They want to see their characters come to life. And I am in a really great position that I can share some of my craft with them and how we get there. I'm not going to share, there's too much to share for everything, but I am
Sure.
trying to pick and choose things that I think were really relevant in big moments on the show and give an insight to, I do get a lot of fun photos with the cast and the crew, and people love seeing it because they get to see them in a different way. And that for me has been really fun. So I am on Instagram at LK Costumes, on Instagram. And honestly, that's kind of my only.
Well, very good. Well, Leslie, you've been a delight to chat with. We all appreciate your work and your enthusiasm. And circle back when you're working on something new. We can chat again.
Well, listen, it's been a real pleasure to be here. I would love to circle back because I am currently doing The Testaments, which is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale. So any fans out there, stay tuned.
Oh, very nice.
Well, yeah, Gilead lives on. But it's going to be a really new and exciting take on Gilead, which is I can't say too much, obviously, at this
Are
point.
you in prep, or have you started production yet?
Oh,
or?
no, we're shooting.
Oh, wow. Well, you circle back then in a few weeks or months, and we'll chat about it.
I would love to. Absolutely love to.
All right. Well, you take care.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me. I really, really enjoyed being here.
My pleasure.
This episode is sponsored by Gemini Crown Tech, owned and operated by Stephanie Moore and Stephanie Harrison. We at Gemini Crown Tech have covered all your production management needs with our proprietary software. Please visit our website at www.geminicrowntech.com and use the code FMP for Filmmaker Mixer podcast listeners, so we know how you heard about us.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.